Headlines such as these are all over the Ukrainian media, stating that Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian Buk missile. No maybe, no probably. It's all reported as fact. The source supposedly comes from the Dutch prosecutor's office. The Netherlands is leading the investigation into the crash that killed almost 300 people who were on board. It appears that they used this article by a Dutch broadcaster titled 5 Questions. It's about MH17. If you scroll down, we get to the important bit. What have the police and the prosecutors found so far? And it says here that the Boeing was brought down by a Buk missile that was fired from a Russian launcher and probably by the Russian military. But here's the problem. Dutch prosecutors told RT that they have reached no such conclusion.
I'm not familiar with these reports, but I can say for sure that they are not correct. We are still investigating the plane crash. We are not yet ready to take any conclusion.
OK, let's get some more analysis now from journalist and broadcaster Neil Clark, who joins us live on the line. Neil, welcome to the show once again. Some very serious accusations here. They're backed up by what people will instantly recognise as seeming to be a credible source. And yet it took just one phone call from RT to prove that what was being claimed just wasn't true. Why do you think that these journalists, well, they claim to be journalists, but this is a basic of journalism, checking your facts. Why didn't they make that call themselves?
Well, they're not interested in the truth, are they? They're only interested in playing politics with this terrible tragedy and, again, accusing Russia. This is all part of the media a blame game, really, that facts go out of the window. Here we've had the incident of the terrible tragedy of MH17. We also had the tragic death of Boris Nemtsov. And in both occasions, we've had so-called journalists rushing to blame Russia and Putin without any evidence. And so this is clear politics. As you said, a simple phone call would have sufficed to find out what the report was actually saying or to find the truth. They weren't interested in that. No, all they were interested in was headlines that Russia was responsible for shooting down this plane. We think back to the day after the MH17 disaster and the infamous headline in the Rupert Murdoch-owned newspaper in Britain, The Sun, we said Putin's missile splashed on the front page. Again, no evidence for that, no apology. And we're in March 2015, and of course we're still waiting for the actual report into actually what caused this terrible tragedy. But it doesn't stop people from blaming Russia, of course.
Yeah, I mean, some of the accusations are direct, some are a bit more indirect, but they continue to come. How long do you think this blame game, which is clearly what it is going to carry on?
But it's going to carry on because the geopolitical situation, because of that, because basically there is a war lobby in the West, an anti-Russian lobby in the West, which wants to use MH17 to demonise Russia. We think back to what happened. We had David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, actually comparing Russia with Nazi Germany after the terrible tragedy and urging for more sanctions on Russia, which is what this war lobby have done. They've used this terrible plane tragedy for political purposes to try to get a tougher line, more sanctions on Russia. So, of course, the blame game is going to continue. And it's amazing. If you go on Twitch, if you go on the internet, you see this claim that, of course, Putin shot down the plane without any evidence. And it's OK. The journalists are able to put it in. They're not being corrected. They're not losing their jobs. If I or any other journalist wrote, for example, that 9/11 was an inside job, it would be instant dismissal. It would be dismissed as conspiracy theorists. But you can put any conspiracy theory you like in the Western media, as long as it's anti-Russian, and you'll get away with it.
It is amazing, isn't it? If you say it about an individual, there'll be all kinds of lawsuits. It seems like we live in a world where you can make claims against the leaders of nations or governments and anything seems to go. That seems to be the reality of the situation. The Dutch investigators, everything really depends on what they conclude. We're expecting to hear their findings in the summer. Do you think that the spin that's being put on this, and like you said, we don't know the facts, do you think that's actually going to intensify in the lead up to their disclosure?
Oh, I'm sure it will, but I think it's pretty revealing that had there been absolutely clear-cut evidence that the so-called pro-Russian separatists, inverted commas, had actually fired this plane down, actually brought this plane down with Buk missiles, had there actually been clear evidence, as the Sun newspaper seemed to think there was, then I think we would have heard it by now. The very fact that it's taken such a long time implies that it's going to be very difficult to get to actually what happened, and all we've got is conjecture. So I think that those people who came out within minutes to blame Putin seem to have had evidence that obviously the Dutch investigators haven't seen yet, because if they did have that clear evidence, the report would have been out by now, surely. The fact that it isn't tells us quite clearly that it is in doubt, that there could be other reasons for this plane coming down. And I think that the Russia foes will once again probably have egg on their face. But of course, it doesn't matter. They got what they wanted. They've got Russia demonized because of this. They've got more sanctions on Russia. And that's all they're interested in. They're not interested in the truth. These are the people who told us Iraq had WMDs. They've told us a lot of false information for years. And they're still doing it, I'm afraid.
Journalist, broadcaster Neil Clark, thanks so much for coming on to speak to us.